Hey everybody, welcome to the Shut Up and Do It podcast, the place you can come and hang out with us while we go through all things real estate with a focus on bringing you top quality topics and speakers, all who believe in a get it done here. I'm your host, Nick Allerud, creator of the Complete Dealflow System and a principal with AA Real Estate. We function as an educator and active single family and multifamily real estate buyer in the greater Boston area and beyond. I am so happy today to have my friend and colleague. Haven't seen this guy in a while. He's been extremely busy in the great North State, as we call it, here down in the Boston area. This is Kevin Lacasse. I truly admire him for what he's accomplished. When I first met him, I think it was in 2007 or 8, he was already the big man in the room. And, just everyone kind of wanted to hang out with this guy. And now that he's here on this podcast, I'm humbled by it. And he's got a lot of things he wants to share with us today. Kevin, thank you so much for being on this call, man.
Great. Nick, yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks for that great introduction.
That's awesome. Hey, why don't you start, before we even get into what you've got going on right now in real estate, start by telling us, why real estate? Who was the Kevin before real estate? What did you do and how'd you end up where you are?
Sure. Yeah, we got to go way back to about 2000 for that. So I started in real estate in about 2000. And prior to that, I was a welding engineer and was welding. And then I got my degree in welding engineering and was working in manufacturing. And it was just miserable. People around me were miserable. And it was just kind of you come in, the bell rings, you take a break, the bell rings, you go home, and it was just not something I was looking forward to doing long term. So, long story short, I was teaching a guy how to weld, and he told me about real estate and how he was going to be retired at such a young age. And I said, no way, that can't be accurate. So I started reading books and studying as much as I could. And I think it was September of 2000, I bought a duplex, and it was a condemned foreclosed duplex for $32,000, and we couldn't afford the rent at the time as well as the mortgage on the duplex, so we moved right into it, not knowing if anything worked. I'd forewent any inspections or anything. So me, my wife, who was pregnant at the time for our son, and a daughter moved in, and it was just a mess. I mean, you turned the water on, all the pipes were burst, the sewage was backed up. I said, well, welcome home, honey. This is what we got to do. So went in immediately, rehab my side first so we could kind of live in it, and then rehab the other side, and started generating rental income from the other side, which exceeded my expenses to live in the whole property. So from that point, I was hooked. So from there, I went on and bought a 5-unit apartment building that had some vacant space. I knew there was some value add there, so we added a couple apartment units to that and turned into a 7-unit apartment building. And from there, I knew I was on my way. So just kind of to continue to flip single-family houses, and was always more intrigued with cash flow type properties. So just kind of wanted the flip properties to generate the income to purchase the cash flow properties, and just kind of kept snowballing that.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's cool. So when you were going through all this, so you had the kind of a grind, right? The welding job was kind of a grind for you. And first of all, I got to ask you, do you remember your wife's first words when she saw that first property you were buying and moving her into? I mean, just curious if you remember what she said.
Yeah. She was great. She said, you know what? We started with nothing. If we wind up with nothing, we're no worse off than we started. So
there we go.
She, it was an old house, kind of creepy. So she did wear a rosary around her neck for the first month or so until she kind of got acquainted and on board. So it was all good.
That's awesome. As you're going through these struggles then, Kevin, so you started with that 2-family, and you did start just flipping single family homes, all mainly in the New Hampshire area, right?
Hampshire, I did do some stuff in Vermont, and it went okay. We did some new construction subdivisions over there. We built some modular homes, and I did buy one multifamily property in that area as well. And but other than that, it's been primarily in New Hampshire, throughout all of New Hampshire.
Nice. Okay, cool. As you grew your business, Kev, did you ever come across a lot of our guests and have come across obstacles or, we don't call them failures, right? We call them learning challenges. Different types of maybe setbacks in your business that really kind of forced a lesson down your throat or willingly, depending on how some people went. Just curious, have you ever had any challenges or obstacles that you faced as you kind of grew?
I wish I could say I ran into none, but that would certainly be a lie. Yeah, absolutely. There's been a lot of challenges. So I'll go through two stories. So the first was with that first building that we bought, not the duplex, but the 5-unit we turned into a 7-unit. So when I first got started, until we got to about 60 apartment units, it was basically just me and my wife. So she'd do the cleaning, I'd do the showings, I'd do all the repairs. And I remember one time, it was on my birthday, and we had gotten a call about a sewage blockage or whatever. So it's on my birthday, but again, I'm the maintenance guy as well as everything else. So I go right over there, and of course, it's blocked up in the basement. So I'm down there trying to fix these old cast iron pipes, and the thing just broke, and I just got completely covered in sewage. I mean, it was a stack of 4-inch pipe up 3 floors. So I'm soaked. She's feeding me a friggin' McDonald's cheeseburger because I didn't dare touch anything.
Oh.
And then she went home. I continued to do my work. And then I just kind of had a moment where I just kind of sat back and I said, you know what? This has got to be the point where almost everybody turns around and says, I am done and walking away. I said, the people that can get over this, I truly believed would make it big in real estate. So I kind of just finished the job with a smile on my face saying, I've got over this hurdle, so I'm going to be able to make it. So that was really a real transition point for me to say, I'm in it for the long term. So certainly kind of a nasty challenge to have to go through. But then from a financial challenge, so I'll jump into another story. So like I had mentioned, we had gotten to about 60 apartment units where it was just me and my wife managing it. I then decided, well, this is too much. I want to focus more on the development piece of it and acquisition and renovation. Therefore, I want to offset the management to a third-party property management company. So with that apartment building that I had bought in Vermont, it was managed by a guy by the name of Jim Pompelli, and he had a management company, and I had him manage that property. But then I also, through conversations, brought him in, and he started managing the rest of my portfolio here in New Hampshire. And it went okay for about 6 months, and then all of a sudden, one of my checks, they were starting to come in late. And then I had a couple of checks bounce, like September, October, revenue checks bounced. Finally, he makes up a story, replaces the checks, and then, cash those, it's okay. Then the following month, everything bounces. Long story short, it was about January when I really finally decided to pull the plug with him. And at that point, I had 60 apartment units that were vacant. He embezzled all of my rent for 2.5 months. He embezzled all my tenant security deposits on 60 apartment units. All the bills that he told me that he was paying, including taxes, insurance, oil, all that stuff, he was not paying. So I was just stuck in this huge financial mess in the middle of January. And I vowed to myself at that point to form a management company. And that was about the time that I formed New England Family Housing and brought my own properties back in and started managing them. So that was a real mess. Luckily, I didn't miss any mortgage payments, and I made good with all of my suppliers and vendors that had been stiffed for the months prior. But it was certainly a challenge.
Wow, that's the first I've actually even heard of that one from you.
Look him up. He's still in federal prison. I get my restitution once a month of about $3.
Oh my God. Oh, Kevin. Ouch, man. All right. So you had, yeah. So you were not only, so you had 60 units at that point that were your units that, were, as you mentioned, not only did you have to make good on all these back payments that had never been made, you now have to kind of probably rehab because they've been now neglected for God knows how long, and then fill these units again, right?
That's Right, as well as the residents that he did put in there were not the best qualified residents, and they were under no management or supervision during the time frame that he was managing it. So yeah, that was quite a challenge.
Oh man, God, thank you for sharing that. So you said, you know what? I can't have this happen again. I'm going to have my own management company at this point because you have to put all your systems and processes in place. And maybe at that point, like myself, when I went through my issues, you had to come some trust issues, right?
That's true. Yes.
But that's would you say that being the trigger for you to kind of get all your procedures and systems in place for the management company, did it end up being a positive swing out of that?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, like you said, there's not mistakes, it's learning experiences. And that certainly was a hard learning experience. But in the end, it made me much stronger as a developer as well as a property manager, because now we do everything in-house. We've got the procedures and so forth to be able to do the management as well as the continued acquisition and development.
Gotcha. Wow. One of the questions we ask our guests typically, which you sort of already answered, is, that first moment when you realize, hey, I need help and I need to start hiring help here. I need to start scaling. If we go beyond the first person you hired for help, which left you in that tough situation, was it just being you and your wife? Like, how did you decide at that point, you know what, we can't do this just as a husband and wife team. We need to start scaling a little bit. What were the first hires you made or the first roles you opened up to try to help out?
So the first hire that we made was actually a project manager to manage our rehabs, because that was the focus of what I've always done is renovation, from single family to multifamily to bigger stuff now. But it's always been that. So that was the first hire. But when we took the properties back over, our first hire was a property manager in-house. Who'd be in charge of answering the phone, doing the showings, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that was a critical hire. And we went through, I think, 3 or 4 people before we actually found one that stuck. Now we have a property manager with us, Leslie. She's been with us since for just over 10 years now. And
Nice.
she's grown with us and she's been life sent, it's been great. So.
Awesome. And she obviously now is she's bought in. I mean, she's bought into the vision and to what you guys have going on now. And I'm assuming would you say one of the biggest costs is trying to recruit and get someone new to join your team to buy into your vision?
Yeah, that's tough because you've got to balance the so when you bring somebody on, it's an additional expense. It's not like you buy an apartment building and you have an electric expense. Your electric expense is offset by the income coming in from that building. So when you bring on a hire, it's payroll that's coming out that's not necessarily geared to a property. So it's tough to be able to justify that expense. So you've got to have at least either money set aside to be able to account for that, or enough in cash flow to know that you're going to be okay to make that payroll. Because regardless of what your properties do, your employees depend on you for a paycheck every week. And I've always felt strongly about, paying my obligations long before I pay myself. And that's something that people just really have to keep in mind before they do decide to make a hire.
Nailed it. Yeah. We just finished up a program not 10 minutes before this podcast on deciding whether it's worthwhile to scale up or to kind of continue to be a one man and one woman operation show for real estate. So in your case, you made the conscious decision that you're going to go all in on this real estate game, right? Like you wanted out of welding and you were just going to start going for it on the single family front, the multifamily front, and thus the hiring of employees that all increase your overhead, right? Little bit here, little bit there. At this point, can I ask you, how do you keep everyone either engaged or motivated, or do you have some sort of accountability on a weekly basis? How do you keep everybody kind of in the loop on what's going on?
Yeah. So, I mean, just kind of stepping back a second, you said, when I was ready to quit. So in 2004, my daughter was born. And at that time I took a leave of absence to rehab a single family home that I was flipping. So I took that maternity leave, spent a week with my daughter and my wife, and then took the other 5 weeks to rehab this place. When I got done, went back to work, my mindset had grown to the point where it was just so painful to go back to that job. And I had been there for a while, and it was coming up to a point of getting a raise because it had been a freeze or whatever. And my boss says, yeah, you've been working really hard. We'll give you a 3% cost of living increase. This was after like 2 years or whatever of a wage freeze. So I looked right at him. I said, you know what? It's not your job to make me rich. That's mine. And I quit.
That's a great line. Nice.
And I have since.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so now as far as keeping everybody engaged, I'm very open booked with my employees. They know exactly what we're doing at any given time, any new deals that I'm taking a look at. And I really am not a micromanager. I really let them take ownership in whatever it is they're doing with us. So, it's kind of a sink or swim type of thing. But if the people do swim, then they're super happy because they get to, run it as if they own it, more to, so to speak. And I just kind of guide along that process as we go.
That's awesome. Oh, it's great. Great stuff. So as you're going through and doing single families and multifamily houses, you started graduating into bigger and bigger deals. What kind of made you grow that way, and what were the hardest challenges you had to overcome getting into those larger deals that you're now doing?
So what kind of got me inspired, not to get political, but I read the book, The Art of the Deal by Donald Trump, and his mantra through that whole thing is think big, think big, think big. So that's kind of, the mindset that I've always had of, I wanted to get into this bigger stuff because it's more sustainable, more interesting. So that's kind of the approach that I took, and just kind of went for it. So and the challenges with getting there are, one, having the systems in place to be able to handle it. And even more importantly is to have the contacts and the relationships for people to trust you to get into that. So, a lot of people want to start out and say, okay, well, I want to do the really big stuff first. Well, if you go start talking to lenders and different programs through, government agencies and so forth, you're not going to get anywhere unless you have a track record. So you would either need to partner up with somebody that has a track record, in which case might be difficult, because if they've already got their own track record, they don't necessarily need somebody new coming in. So the other way is to build your track record by doing smaller deals and incrementally getting bigger as you go along.
Yeah, for sure. Would you find too, and we're kind of jumping the gun a little bit, but because you just mentioned that partnerships on the larger scale, is your business, have you ever been open to partnering with maybe a smaller group that's looking to get into the deal? And I know a few people, I guess, to frame that, right? A few people that we know that are in the larger stuff, they have a piece of their business where they will put their track record on the line for somebody else, maybe in exchange for a piece of that person's deal, or a little bit of an equity raise or something to that effect. Is that something you guys have ever experienced yet? If you haven't, that's okay too. Just curious.
You know what? I'm open to it. I do have partners. So on our portfolio in Berlin, we've got about 100 apartment units up there, and I do have a partner associated with that. We have a campground, and I have a partner associated with that campground. So I am open to it. I have been in other partnerships that have not gone well. But I continue to try with partnerships because, I think they can be mutually beneficial. The biggest thing with partnerships is you've got to know what each other's roles and goals are in the partnership before getting into it. Because if you go in blind with these assumptions, they may not line up with your partner's assumptions.
Nailed it. I think that you and I, speaking from that side too, where we've had a couple of partnerships that were sinking ships, if you will. Right. Maybe our trust issues are coming back into play, but I think you nailed it on the head. If we have roles and responsibilities laid out up front, right, and having those tough conversations up front, that's usually, I think, what sets people up for more success than others. So you already kind of led into my next question. My next question was going to be, so your current portfolio and your current projects. Do you care to share what you got going on these days?
Sure, yeah, I'd love to. That's what I find most interesting at this point. So, like I said, we started in '01, so we've been at this game for a while, but now we've got under ownership and management just over 600 units. And those 600 units are made up of mobile home park sites, market rate apartment housing, a couple single family homes, but not that much, as well as affordable housing projects that we're currently working on, and the campground, like I said. So that's kind of our general portfolio. As far as current projects that we got going on, we just finished up a low-income housing tax credit project in Bristol, New Hampshire. That was a 32-unit ground-up apartment complex. It's now 100% occupied. We have another LIHTC project that we're working through in Claremont, New Hampshire. That's going to be 36 apartment units and about 10,000 square feet of commercial space. And also getting into single-family home development, where we have a subdivision that's a 24-lot cluster single-family home subdivision that we started putting in the infrastructure last fall, and currently we've got 2 model homes done and complete and a 3rd under construction, and that's product for sale.
And you can still hang out with us and do a podcast at the same time.
And as a matter of fact, I am currently on the market and looking for another tax credit deal. So I've got a couple irons in the fire that may come to fruition, but yeah, that's kind of what I've been working on.
What drew you into those tax credit deals? We don't actually talk about that a lot here on this podcast. And I know you and I have a little bit of experience. You have a ton of experience in that. What drew you to those?
So in New Hampshire, in some of the markets that I work in more of the rural towns, or cities like Claremont, Rochester, Franklin, Berlin, Bristol. All these are kind of older mill towns, and they're great because there's very stable rental market. The rental vacancy rates are very low, but there's not a ton of appreciation, and the rents aren't super high. The problem is to develop a new apartment complex in those areas, the economics just don't make sense because the cost of construction far exceeds what you would get in value from the property being fully occupied and rented. So I knew that this was a challenge. So I said, okay, well, how do other developers do it? Because I see these other developments going up in these markets and wonder, well, what's their source of funds to make this happen? Because it just financially didn't work, in my opinion. So the more that I looked into it, I realized that it was due to equity raised from sales of tax credits that were able to generate the equity to make the projects financially feasible. So when I learned about that, which was probably about 8 years ago, I really dove in deep to try to make those relationships, with the different people in the agencies and learn as much as I can about them and what the process is, which is pretty tough because if you think compliance is tough with a conventional loan through a bank, try compliance through a government agency tax credit. It's but as long as you surround yourself with a good team and good consultants and so forth, you can make it work.
Awesome. No, good stuff. You also mentioned an extremely sexy topic that people love on our show, which was mobile home parks.
Yeah.
And if you don't mind, too, tell us a little bit about your mobile home park experience and what you like and dislike about that.
Yeah, so mobile home parks, probably my favorite asset class, to be honest with you. So we have 2 mobile home parks. One of them's a 35-unit park in Tilton, and that was completely, it had 2 residents when we bought it, so we filled it up. Now it's 100% full. And then the other one is a mobile home park in Rochester, and that's got 150 home sites over there. And the thing that I like about mobile home parks is, if you think about it, when an apartment building has a maintenance call or some type of failure, it's very rarely the dirt that breaks. It's usually the building and its components. Well, with a mobile home park, essentially what you own is the dirt. And then the residents park their own residence on your dirt. So you're essentially responsible for the infrastructure, which does happen. It can go wrong, but certainly not as often as as the property itself breaking. And the other thing is they're essentially long-term residents, because, you know, the mobile home communities, most of them, their homes have been there for a long time, and it's very costly to be able to move it. I mean, to the tune of probably 10 or 15 grand to remove and relocate a manufactured home into a new community. So they're pretty much there to stay. So from a cash flow standpoint, it's probably about the most stabilized asset class you can get into.
Wow. And you turned one around, right? Or you said you turned a couple around, but what was the biggest challenges there? Like, what were your first 2 or 3 steps that you had to do to turn those around?
On the Tilton project, you're saying? So that one was a matter of bringing in new homes and advertising new homes for sale. So on that, we tried to fill it up as quick as possible. So we were advertising homes for sale, just outright sales. We were offering a lease option program, and also on our last bunch, just so we could get them occupied, we offered them up just for rent. So they're, so we're leasing out the mobile home as well as the pad site. So that was the challenge in that one. And it took probably about 3 years, I think, to get to occupancy on that. The other park, when we bought it, there was some managerial ownership distress type situation there. We came in ahead of time and actually managed it for the ownership prior to purchasing it, which definitely gave us an upper hand because we knew the asset, we knew what it needed and so forth. There were some vacancies there. So we brought in, I think it was 16 homes in the course of about 3 months. And before we got our COs on the last home, we had them all either rented or sold. So that just really went fast. So so that worked out great. Cash was pretty well.
So it sounds like you pretty much have done every single strategy in real estate. You've done fix and flip, you've done wholesaling, you've done buy and hold, multifamily, mobile home parks, tax credit investing, and the refi and roll strategies. I'm trying to think in my head, if there's anything you haven't done, and I can't really think of anything. That's pretty crazy.
I have, you know what I haven't done is what you've mastered, which is short sales.
Most people run screaming from short sales, so I understand that.
But no, seriously, I feel, you got to go with the flow of the market. You know, as markets change and as, different opportunities arise, you got to take advantage of what's coming at you. So that's kind of why I've done that from one perspective. The other perspective is I really believe in diversification, not in the sense of diversified into the stock market and so forth, but diversified within the realm of real estate. So if, tax credit deals are really hot, then, you've got the source of revenue coming in from that, even though maybe market rate rentals cools, or single family home development, falls out. I've still got the fallback of the cash flow from my apartments. So that's one thing. And then diversification, even among markets. So I'm scattered from northern New Hampshire to southern New Hampshire, from towns that border Maine and towns that border Vermont. So just kind of the whole state, encompassed, because, when we experience higher vacancies, say in Berlin, it seems like Claremont's 100% full. And then, we'll get a hiccup in Rochester, but then Berlin is 100% full. So it's just really, things kind of float around, and it really it really goes a long way in balancing that cash flow.
Man, that was probably the most powerful lesson I think we've had here. So diversification, not necessarily within the stock market, but within asset classes, within geographies, within, in your own real estate portfolio. That was huge, man. I mean, they talk about multiple streams of income, but you literally kind of have those covered regardless of market cycle, right? Sellers, buyers, markets, that's pretty great. Where do you feel as though we are in or headed right now in your geo for the market cycle right now?
As far as appreciation and so forth, I don't really look at that so much from my from any of our rental type stuff, because it's just a stabilized market. New Hampshire has a vacancy rate of, I think, 1.75, and we I think we're about 20,000 units less than what we should have in the state as far as a stabilized market. And units are coming on both in the form of affordable housing, market rate, and single family homes are only coming on at about 6,500 units per year. In order to be stabilized, we should be bringing on, no, I think we're bringing on 4,500 units per year. And to be a stabilized market, we should be at 6,500 units per year. But there's also this backlog of 20,000 units in deficit. So I see for a long time, there's going to be a continued need for more housing in New Hampshire. And also, you know, the stability of the income streams is just going to remain stable. I don't see a whole lot of fluctuations coming up. As far as appreciation and so forth, you know, with interest rates rising and so forth, you may get some drop in pricing and things like that. But as far as the income generated from the cash flow, I really see it pretty stable for a long time into the future. As far as single family home sales, same thing. There's very little production of single family homes in the market. So, you know, fingers crossed, I think we're going to be strong going forward. Again, interest rates may change that to some extent. The markets might fluctuate to some extent, but the core, not economic, but the geographical need of housing in the area, I think is gonna hold us for pretty long term.
That's great. Prior to this podcast, you had mentioned a little tidbit on the associations up there within the mobile home parks or influencing the mobile home. I'm trying to remember exactly what it was, but is that something you'd be willing to share on the podcast so we can kind of just chat about it a little bit, or no?
So I can touch on that a little bit. So
okay.
There's an organization called ROC. It stands for Resident Owned Community. And they started here in New Hampshire, and I believe they're national now. Their charter is to assist. So when a mobile home park comes up for sale, their charter is to basically round up the residents of the community and encourage them to purchase it so they become a resident-owned community or a ROC. In theory, it's a great theory because then the residents, you know, they own their own asset and they're supposedly, you know, protected from, you know, increases in rent and so forth. But the problem is they don't tell the whole story. And the whole story is they come in with loans that are generally higher than what a conventional buyer would be able to purchase it at. So their loan amounts are higher than typically what their rental amount would be if it was owned by a private owner. And the problem is they're a nonprofit and they have some pretty good lobbying power. And the legislation is drawn up that when a mobile home park comes up for sale, the residents have the right to form a co-op. And if they form a co-op, they have the right to be able to basically give a first right of refusal. It's not an actual first right of refusal, but it's essentially that, to the current owner and basically buy it out from the potential buyer of the mobile home park, from the private buyer. So the problem is that the not all the residents have to join the co-op. Only a certain, you know, just whoever wants to join it can join it. But then it only takes a majority vote of the people that join the co-op to make the decision on whether or not to buy the whole mobile home park. So to give you an example on that, there was a property in Lacasse, and I don't know how many units it was, but it was pretty big. Let's say it was 200 units. I think 30 or 40 people joined the co-op. So it took only about 25 people to make the decision for the entire community to purchase it and to make it go co-op. So then they purchase it, go co-op. They have this higher interest rate from the community loan fund. Plus they have to self-manage it, which most of these people are not business owners. They're just there to live and work their typical day job. So they either manage it themselves and do a horrible job and the place looks terrible, or they have to hire another third-party property management company to manage on their behalf, which again increases their expenses. So at the end of the day, they're still at the mercy of the community loan fund for their funding source. and they're at the mercy of the property management company that's managing their asset for them, in which case both those things typically add up for a higher expense than what they would have if a private owner like myself came in and purchased it, got a conventional loan, and just did the right thing as far as doing right by them and maintaining it and keeping the rents, you know, somewhat stable. So yeah, it's a problem and a challenge in New Hampshire, and I believe that that's growing in other states. So the more that other people can be on top of the issue and you know, really see it from both sides and really fully understand it before they sign up, you know, all in, it's definitely beneficial.
Oh man. So this is a huge deal, guys. So if you guys didn't catch that, right? So this is for the owner occupants of a mobile home park or for the new developers or buyers of mobile home parks coming in. So tell me if I got this right, Kevin. Under the guise of a nonprofit trying to help people, right? Under a 501c3, that's a nonprofit status. These people come in, oh, it looks like, you know, this big, evil, bad developer is about to come and buy your mobile home park. You guys should get together. We'll even fund you guys to take over and buy your own park so that you can own it and not the private developer who's, of course, an evil fat cat sitting on a high castle. You guys can then own this thing. Don't worry about the paperwork. You might owe us 16, 20, 25% on interest payments, right? You might also not really know how to manage it, but don't worry. We got someone else we can bring in for that too that's charging only 25, 30% management. I'm making these numbers up. But what I'm telling is, do I kind of have it right that under the guise of a nonprofit and helping people, these people are coming in and either outright blocking private owners to buy these things because they're able to kind of be a shark and almost predatory to these mobile homeowners, right? Is that accurate?
Yeah, no, you just nailed it, and they're making millions off of the back of these resident-owned communities. Absolutely, it's really a shame, and it's something that's got to be known more about because there's not too many people that really understand it. And you just gave it a great synopsis. Your numbers may be off a bit, but I think we did the gist of it, and you're right.
That's it. Yeah. So to our listeners, I mean, Kevin sort of told me about that offline, and that got me so riled up, especially because I have never even heard of this before. And I know a few other mobile home park developers and owners in like Florida, Georgia, Alabama. I don't think they've experienced this yet, but it's coming, right? This is coming.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's crazy. Hey, Kevin, if there's one piece of advice that you could have given yourself back in 2000 and I don't know, 2000, you started in 2002, say 2004 or 5. You look back at your, young Kevin self. What would you have told yourself back then?
I would have told myself, just stick with it. It's not going to happen in 2 years or 5 years, but 10 years down the road, you're going to be very happy that you did. And I tried to coin this term a long time ago, called stick-to-itiveness, and that's it's kind of like tenacity or whatever, but you just got to stick to it and just keep your head down, keep grinding for deals. The door's going to get slammed on your face, but you just got to keep opening new doors, talking to new people, and it all works out in the end.
That's amazing. We also talk about in ours, obviously, the namesake of this podcast, right? The Shut Up and Do It podcast was built for that exact same reason that you just mentioned, which is the tenacity and the stick-to-itiveness. If we can't take your term, Kevin, we're gonna go with ours, and we're happy to implement both. How's that? So, Kevin, man, I really, really appreciate having you on the show today. I know you've got a heck of a lot of stuff going on. What's the best way that people can reach out to you, where they can learn more about you?
Sure. Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks a lot for having me on. It's been a pleasure, and you keep doing what you're doing because I know you're doing great at it. But if people want to get a hold of me, I'm kind of old school. I've got a couple ways to get a hold of me. One is by my email address, which is Lacasse, KLACASSE @nefamilyhousing.com, short for New England. And on our website, which is www.nefamilyhousing.com.
That's awesome. Guys, thank you so much. Remember to like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.